We've never really fitted into the UK indie scene, and obviously there's 100 subgenres there. We don't really fit into any of them. They've added in a new genre on like the Spotify rap thing that's like Scottish rock. We don't even I don't think we even fit into that.
Hi, my name is Jen and I'm joined by Sam from Twin Atlantic for the latest in Enemies in Conversation series. So thank you very much for joining me today. How are you? First of all, how are things at the moment?
Am I honest here?
Yeah, go for it. Honesty is always best.
No, I feel I feel a bit stressed out, but it's all first world problems because um, we've had an album come out during obviously quite a crazy time.
Yeah.
We've done two albums in one pandemic. Who knew that could be done? So, yeah, I feel tested, but maybe that's exactly where I'm supposed to be. Not, don't feel comfortable, don't feel happy, satisfied. I'm kind of like existing in that stressy zone, but I think that's where I'm supposed to be. So good, I guess. I'm doing
Good
good.
but stressed. Good but stressed. But coping.
Well,
That's
I think it's, do you know, I think it's just obviously the world that we're living in is quite stressful just now. So, and how am I doing? Quite a complicated answer for the
yeah.
first question. And that's only the first question of an interview as well.
But in terms of writing the record in the pandemic, I think previously, was it your fourth album? You built a whole studio in order to be able to do it. Now you were doing it from home in a pandemic with a young baby. Your wife's a student nurse. It kind of threw everything at you possible, then writing remotely. So how was that? What was the whole experience like, and how much of an influence do you think it had on the music?
I can maybe answer it in reverse. 'Cause, like the influence it had was like the album wouldn't exist without all those circumstances. And this is such a complicated record to talk about because really we only made the record because of like the situation we were put in. We had our previous album Power come out and we were doing this. Our band's always been like when we're on the road and we're playing shows, it starts to make more sense even to us, never mind like our fans and the music press and people that maybe don't quite get, because we're all every album we do is very different to the one before. So it can take people a minute to digest it, but we were in the middle of feeling it starting to be accepted, and then lockdown happened, um, which kind of like obviously we didn't have any work for like based nearly 2 years, so we were kind of forced to like, well, what's our other resources to like make a record because we've got families and like we've been doing this band for like 15 years. We've got like mortgages and like we're proper adults now, so to speak, or at least on paper. So we kind of have to like, we couldn't just be like, fuck it, we'll take 2 years off. We were the exact opposite. We were like, oh fuck, we need to make an album like tomorrow because like you just mentioned, we built a studio to make the previous album, and it was like literally an all or nothing effort where basically everything that we'd kind of like all our personal savings and all the kind of any value or in sitting in the band, we turned that into something to help like our rehearsal room that we rented for over 10 years. We turned that into we basically cleared it out, turned it into a studio, took loans out and all sorts of stuff. Just I think we were so desperate for creative freedom, and almost we wanted to go back to that feeling of being completely lost and not knowing how things worked. Because when we first started the band, I'd only really been playing the guitar for like a year or something. I hadn't really written songs. We'd never played. Everything was a new experience. And I think we were pining for that again. So what seemed like quite a crazy decision, like why are you guys risking everything at this point? Like you kind of got somewhere and then you're risking it all. We just kind of craved that new experience thing. So we started diving into like synthesizers and outboard recording gear and programming, and basically I think because we'd been through that journey, we needed to tour. We like needed to make it. Do you know what I mean? We needed to make all that back to exist as a band and as a as individuals and as our families and stuff like that. So yeah, the knee-jerk reaction was, oh fuck, we need to make another record to get money coming through, and it's shit because I guess this is the ugly side of the music industry that people you always hide. Do you know what I mean? We've always had these issues, and you always have like bumps in the road, but we've always strived to like look super powerful, and like I don't mean that in like a kind of sinister way. I just mean like look like we know what we're doing, which makes me laugh because I know that we don't. But especially see the era that we kind of the origins of our band was like super competitive, rather than like there being a community of like a Britpop movement or like the kind of British indie thing that's happening again just now with like it's more like it's gone back to like DIY ethics with bands like that. That didn't really exist when we were starting out. It was like kill or be killed mentality. And I don't know, that's probably a really bad thing because parts of that stayed with us where we were hiding all the probably the really interesting stuff about being in a band. We were like, oh no, sweep that under the rug. Partly why the album's called Transparency is because we're trying to like lift the veil on that a little bit. Not that what we do is unique in any way, but it's more like we've never shared that. It's such a complex question. Like, what was it like making this record? It was like in a logistical sense, it was absolute fucking hell. But in a creative sense, it was like the most freeing, like fun and like revealing thing that we've done yet. We were doing it remotely with the producer Jack Knife Lee, who we've worked with before 2 or 3 times. He was in LA, I was in Glasgow, so it was an 8-hour time difference. And even just that alone, when you're trying to make quite an intricate, obviously like we want it to sound good and things like that. So there was like just the basic logistics of like sharing files, but also 8 hours is a big time difference.
Yeah.
And then at the time I was in like a 2-bedroom old tenement flat in Glasgow, which for people who don't know, like the building's like over 150 years old.
Yeah.
So that has its challenges in terms of like I'm in a like rock band and I've kind of developed this style of like our choruses are really big, but not when like you've got a baby sleeping in the next room and you're next to I mean I could hear like my neighbours like talking at the level we're talking at, so I couldn't really get to the chorus and like
let rip. Yeah.
I couldn't do the whole Scottish Axl Rose thing. I don't know why I've compared. I don't know where I've pulled that name from because I've never heard anyone say that about us.
It'll be on your reviews now.
Oh no,
Scottish Axl Rose. Yeah,
straight on the first line of Wikipedia now. But yeah, so logistically, it was we're never making an album like this ever again. I don't want to. Like,
no, don't make us. Yeah.
And it's funny because I've seen a few people being like, oh, it's so different for your band and it sounds different, and it's like, yeah, no fucking wonder. You know what I mean? We've been really spoiled in the beginning. We were working in like we were making records the way that bands in like the 70s, like I don't know if you've seen the Beatles Get Back documentary.
Yes, yeah, it's amazing.
We've made 2 albums like that where we sat about for weeks and we like
really introspective.
Like, and like we made another album at Rockfield with Gil Norton where we lived there for 3 months, and we're using all this vintage gear and like honestly the exact same way that bands of yesteryear made music. But the last sort of couple of records after that, we've sort of been like dipping our toe more in like a modern hybrid style of production, and that's actually what's influenced things with our songwriting more than anything, to be honest. In terms of like letting go of the preciousness of like, oh, but we're a rock band, so the drums need to sound like this, or there needs to be a message, and we kind of let go of all the rules. But the pandemic slamming the brakes on everything for us, it kind of once and for all, we kind of like, we were probably just still holding on by our fingertips to like our identity, whatever whatever that was or whatever that is, and we kind of just let go. So that's why it was really, really fun creatively, because there was no grandeur to be had. And actually, we're as people not really very grand. Do you know what I mean? We still live in Glasgow. Like I'm saying, we're now kind of like real family people who we're not out like partying every night. And I mean, we kicked the absolute fucking shit out of our 20s. Like way more than we ever probably let people know, because you don't want to be like a Scottish stereotype either. So we always used to kind of hide that side of things.
Because there is such a difference between songs like Get Famous and then Keep Your Head Up. Because obviously Keep Your Head Up is very heartfelt. It seems to be about the male friendship, about mental health, things like that. How did that one come about? And also, it seems like quite a bold move to put it so early, to put it at the start, to have that, because most of the time you think, right, we're going to come in with a bang. And now it's something that is quite introspective, it's quite emotional. So lots of questions in one there, but kind of how did that one come about? And what do you think the sort of reaction will be to that?
Well, it's I feel like I'm still answering your first question a little bit. The way that the record was made was like sleepless nights, and because of the time difference, I'm like starting say at 9 o'clock at night, working till like 3, 4 in the morning, sometimes going right through to like when my wife was waking up to go to work at 7 a.m. because music can kind of do that to my brain where I lose track of time. And so I was existing in a bit of a kind of like surreal environment for about 4 or 5 weeks. That was the first wave of making this album. So I was kind of just like writing, not really remembering what I was saying or my train of thought and blah blah. And it wasn't until basically when you submit a record into your label and for publishing and all that, I've done this every album. You have to sit and type out all the lyrics and then send them off. So that I get it must be a publishing thing. You'd think I would know by this point what it's all about. But when I was doing it, it's the first time that I actually was, and this is like a year later. It was the first time that I was actually taking it in, and I started like uncontrollably like laughing at myself and being like, "Mate, you are like venting all these like pressures and stress." Because I made myself really unwell on the last album because we just put way too much into it, and there was so much at risk that I'd had like a bit of a kind of private like mental breakdown that not I mean I suppose they're all serious in their own right, but I mean I'm still downplaying it because it's such an alien concept to me to like hit a brick wall in my mind, and then my mind was like shutting down my body, and we were having like doctors come out to the studio, and I was like trying to walk on stage when we were touring Power, and I was like saying to the guys like I can't fucking do it. I feel so unwell. I'm going to faint. I'm going to be sick. And I'd never really had that before, and I don't really know. Still to this day, don't really know what that was. Like some people have said like new like the pressures of being a new parent and all your savings in this record, and we'd signed to a major label, and was it just all too? I don't know. I still don't really know. But when we then got thrown into lockdown, and everyone around the world was kind of having a bit of an anxiety attack because like, oh my god, we're living in a disaster movie. So I was processing all that in the real time of processing the pandemic, and like, oh my fucking god, I'm going to be bankrupt next week because this tour, we're not doing any festivals, everything's fucked. I'm writing kind of in this like more, I don't really know how to describe it, but I just wasn't really in control of my thoughts, I don't think. So then a year later, when I was like writing all the lyrics down, I was like, oh my god, man, you were like decompressing and like organizing your mind and coming to terms with a lot of things on the more sort of introspective songs. And we got to the end of what I thought was the end of the record, and I realized like that it was an album about that, but we didn't really have a song that represented it yet. So that's where Keep Your Head Up came in. It was really purposefully written with all that in mind, basically, to try and have a song that tied, the thread that was going through the record as a lyrical theme. Let's tie the ends of it together And if we're going to write a song that on the nose, like let's put it at the fucking start of the album. And I quite like that the 4 singles that were out before it led people in this other path.
Yeah.
And therefore the first song on the album is even harder hitting. So very deliberate, like a really deliberate move. And yeah, it's about like male friendship and mental health. And I'd never really written a song about either. I'd always disguised it with like a love story between a boy and a girl, or uh, metaphors of myself, like I'm driving a car or whatever. You know, I tried to do the whole Springsteen cinematic metaphor thing. So yeah, it was a really deliberate move. We've done it before on another record. We've got an album called Great Divide, and we started that with a really slow, kind of more vulnerable song. And we hadn't done it for a couple of albums, so as well, I was just like, that would be fun to do again.
It's interesting, as you say, that it is almost a bit like a red herring with the singles, because it has been polarizing, obviously, in some of the fans, to put it politely. There's been some strong reactions where people aren't quite sure what to make of it. I think where they felt like it's a completely different band, it's a completely different sound. As you said, you never wanted to make the same album twice. Yeah. And then they're going to put the album on and go, oh, okay, this wasn't what I was expecting at all. I think many people were expecting like a party album of wall-to-wall bangers from what they heard from the singles, when there is this introspection and there are these themes going throughout it. So how did you feel? Obviously, as you say, it's been such a personal album with this essentially free writing of what you were doing, where you were decompressing and just putting it all out on the page, to then have the songs come out, to then have this visceral, polarizing reaction for something so personal. How do you deal with that?
Well, when something gets a polarizing reaction, like, it feels amazing, because that is our duty as creators. You know what? My origin in like being creative is like I went to art school, and I went to Glasgow School of Art for a couple of years before the band kind of took over, and I was kind of always taught like you're not allowed to use the word nice. I don't know. See, just like making the album that your fans want, it's quite a nice thing to do, and like everything. I just haven't ever been able to like. It just feels a bit kind of like dirty, or like something sinister about. I feel like I'd be taking advantage of people that liked our band by just like shitting out a record that they would expect us, that they would expect it to sound like. Whereas, like I'm saying, I was trying to say, I've interrupted myself again. It's kind of our duty to like remain creative and like push the boundary of the concept of our band as a thing that we started when we were like 18. We're now in our 30s. It's getting quite interesting and juicy now, and if we just like keep pushing people's buttons, including our own, I feel like when we step back and look at the full catalogue, it'll be something to be really proud of. So when we get a polarizing reaction, part of me is obviously like hurt by it, because like no one likes to be like slagged off. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But then again, I've got to remind myself that we like live in the generation of like easily offended, and like the songs that we put out are 100% a joke. And if you don't get the joke, you tend to like get offended. You know what I mean? So then you're like, on face value, like, what the fuck is this? What the fuck? And I don't know. It's quite interesting to have an album out there that has that reaction. Maybe the next one won't be, or maybe there won't be another album. I don't know, but I like to kind of live in that area where like we don't even know. Do you know what I mean? It's way more fun, and like listen, we know that we've always kind of like we've never really fitted into like the UK rock scene. We've never really fitted into the UK indie scene, and obviously there's 100 subgenres there. We don't really fit into any of them.
You might as well do what you want, and it's making people feel something, as you say, as opposed to nice. It's feeling something, whether good or bad or laughter or like, revulsion. Anything is good.
We don't even fit into. Did you see they've added in a new genre on like the Spotify rap thing that's like Scottish rock? We don't even. I don't think we even fit into that,
Mm.
which is really, really ironic because I sing the way that I talk. Um, so yeah, if we're not going to fit in, we might as well. We might as well just be more awkward.
I
But
think I saw one that said it was like a Scottish Jamie T that just got a Nintendo for Christmas with some of the sort of dancey elements. And I was
yeah,
like,
yeah. Well, I haven't seen that one. That to be fair, that's quite funny. But it just makes me think like we don't know what you're talking about.
yeah.
It does sound like that now if you take this on like a first time listen. Uh, I'll take that. That's quite funny. But you've not really been paying attention to the things that have come before. Do you know what I mean? But
That's the
that's
thing.
okay. That's
And then
okay.
I think the way that people can look at it as well is obviously with things like the video for Get Famous, you were
Yep.
more than happy to lampoon things. So you kind of expect it if people then do it back to you. It's like
Yeah,
you
yeah.
you looked very comfortable in the video for Get Famous with some of the scenarios and things that were going on. I know you mentioned before that it's a bit of a guilty pleasure watching some of the influences and things. So how fun was that to make and to get to do a silly side, to get to do something fun like that?
I believed in the idea, like as like a kind of a wee mini art project. Every music video is that, and it's like if you don't fully dive into this and commit, you're going to miss the target. Do you know what I mean? It's not going to be obvious that I'm making fun of it. So like I really need to go for it. And
Mm.
I mean like as much as I view myself as like a musician and a songwriter, there's that third pillar of my being in a band, which is like a performer.
Yeah.
And anyone who's seen a Twin Atlantic show, it's quite different to how the records sound. And there's a bit of the kind of like I'm trying to put on like the kind of like Freddie Mercury meets Dave Grohl
Yeah.
rock show. Um, so there's part of that character that exists in me anyway.
Yeah.
Um, I've manufactured it. Do you know what I mean? I wasn't like that as a kid, or I wasn't like that. I was like quite shy and like not very confident at times. But um, the power of music transformed me. But I just find showing off and like putting on a performance like really really fun. And if people have a problem with that, that's more a them issue. You know what I mean? And maybe it's just a phase. Maybe it's just a phase I'm going through because we sat in the house for like a year and a half, and I would get that out of my system by playing like Reading and Leeds or Glass or whatever like uh, Transmit and all the kind of big festivals we were live on TV. I would get to exercise that performer demon.
It's a catharsis, isn't it? That's the
Yeah,
thing for
yeah,
every musician is getting to go out. You've been in a studio, you've been locked at home doing this. As you said at the beginning, touring is then the payoff. Touring is then the
yeah.
reward for that process. And now, of course, it's not so as you mentioned about live streams and things. I think over the last 2 years, we've seen more of people's living rooms, bathrooms, whatever than ever before when they're performing because it's something that you all need to do. You mentioned about showing off, but it's true. It's I think as humans, not to get too arty, you need the connection. And so we were all trying to form that in any way that we could, because you say you'd normally did it on a festival stage with thousands of people watching you. So now it's what can we do to recreate that in the circumstances we're in?
Totally, totally. And I think as well, I just felt in terms of the songs on this record that are kind of making fun or trying to kind of like annoy people. I did feel like excited by that as like people might hate this, but that made me want to do it even more.
Good.
Like I think making this album, I've realized like I'm quite a damaged person. Like I'm not a very like state like or at least like I've put on a good face or something, or I've been able to hide it. I don't know if I I don't know if like I was even I think I've hidden it from myself. Do you know what I mean? And I've always had like quite close under the surface all these like big problems and emotional things that have like riddled me with like anxiety or like we're saying like I've got this trigger in me that wants to like show off, and I'm like the guy that always makes a joke. Seeing like my family or friend group, I am so annoying with that. So I don't know whether I just was like marrying the realization of that up with the thing I'm most passionate about in my life as this band, So I was like, I'm just gonna like see if I can fuse these two moments together. So I keep doing. I don't really have an answer. I'm kind of like, I don't know why I did that, but I did it. But I did it. I did it. I,
So I did.
again, it does go in partly with the name of the record. Like, I was just being honest. That's just what I wanted to do, and rather than like trying to carve some like beautiful soundscapey record with me singing like ballads over it or something, I don't know what people want, so I'll just do what I want.
Yeah.
But like, just couldn't continue to like lie to myself. Or yeah, I must have needed to do this. So in that sense, like however it's received, it doesn't really matter. I'm dead proud of the fact that I followed through on that because it's harder to do, I think.
Well, as we said, you had everything stacked up against you doing it remotely, the time difference, a young baby in the flat, the circumstances you were in. It
Mm,
is an achievement to have done it because, as you say, with not knowing what was happening, the uncertainty, everything closing down, it would have been easy, as you say, to just put your head in the sand and go, not now, not dealing with this.
yeah, yeah. Well,
Ended
we,
up,
we 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 really like honestly didn't have a choice because we had just get dropped by our label at the time as well, which was a bit of a curveball for us, obviously.
was that about 3 weeks in to the pandemic that happened?
Yeah, it was something like it was like it felt like yeah, it was honestly that early, and it was during the making of this because we were we were making like a sister record to go with Power, the previous one, and there's some songs that we saved from it that have ended up on this or not on this yet. They're still there, but they're not right for this. Um, and so we were kind of trying to piece that together, and our plans were to be going back into the studio, and so our my mind was on the edge of like, right, let's make more music. But there's like some kind of really basic things of like when you hand an album in, you get paid, and like we'd like planned for all of that. So the fact that then the rug was pulled from under our feet, and I know this sounds like, oh fucking poor boo hoo, poor us. I'm in a band that's like I'm 10 million people around the planet's dream job, and I get to do it. So I'm not looking for sympathy or anything like that. I'm just trying to tell the truth. Like that is why we made the album, is because we had like bills to pay and shit. And that's the reality of being like a mid-level band. The hard, harsh
It's still a
facts of
job.
life.
It is a job. That's how
Yeah,
you
yeah,
earn your
exactly.
money. Yeah.
Yeah, well, we've not been doing it for 15 years, and it's not our job. It's been our full-time job since 2009.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, that was also a bit of a gut punch to then, like, in the midst of trying to fix something, be dropped by this big, massive, basically the biggest record label in the world, and who the umbrella that they're under. Um, and there was reasons for that that were kind of really taken out of our hands. There was like much, much bigger issues that I'm like probably too nervous to like get into because I would like probably create a whole host I mean, a shitstorm that I'm incapable of handling. But it did leave us again with a bit more of a blank slate of like needing to fix a problem, which is a real motivator to then that was where the sort of idea came to like, well, we need to do it. We need to do something. Who do we trust that we could work with remotely? And Jack Knife Lee having like he was in a band before, a band Compulsion, so we're kind of on the same wavelength with like how to make music, and even just as people. He's from Dublin, we're from Glasgow. They're quite similar in terms of like the people that it turns out those cities turn out. So um, a lot of the decisions made to make the record were kind of like forced on us, but then in other ways they were like really natural. Like we didn't even think about some of the things that we've put loads of thought into making records in the past, if you know what I mean. So
Yeah.
it's an interesting album that it is a big mixture of like really thought through, deliberate, and also just like total fun and like the most easygoing we've ever had. So
Because I mean that's the thing. So you had the label in a pandemic. Craig is now left as well.
yeah,
Did it reach a point where you're going, what next? What is going to be thrown at us?
yeah. I mean, I didn't know. I mean, what else is there? What else is there? Who
Don't
could
want to jinx
possibly?
you.
Yeah. It felt at points like that had happened, but I mean, like obviously the lineup changing is like such an emotional thing for most bands, but in particular with this one because we've been on quite a roller coaster of an experience from the beginning. Um, and we feel like we're still chasing something. And we don't even know what that is, but we don't feel like we're finished yet. We don't feel. I don't mean finished in the class. Ah, use are fucking finished. I mean like we've not completed the task yet, whatever that is. And maybe it's a lifelong thing. I don't know. Maybe it's like as long as we write songs, and maybe that's why we're kind of fearless when it comes to putting out different sounding things, is because we know in ourselves that like it's cool that the band evolves. It's like that's interesting. Do you know what I mean? And like Craig stepping away from the band was something that he had to do at that time, and really his passion is playing drums, and it's something that he does every day. But we weren't really playing enough gigs to sustain that being there for him. The more songs we needed, the more intense the studio time became, and it was more focused on like Ross and I writing songs or producing each other's ideas, and then so I totally understand from his perspective the why and the when and things like that. I know I
Free
told you this off camera. We were on camera, but off record, whatever.
off.
I'm at Ross's studio, so we're trying to figure out how to play these songs live just now. Because again, the way that we made the record, we didn't we weren't like with each other playing parts or like Jackknife is playing like 90% of everything on this record through the screen and through it's a crazy record actually. It's crazy. Anyway,
You say
sorry.
you just sat like this going, what's going on? Like,
Yeah, a little bit.
and so with 2022, what are your ambitions for the band now? What are your hopes for the forthcoming year? Fingers crossed, like touch wood if it all goes to plan.
Well, we just postponed our like album launch in stores, so we're gonna reschedule them because the fans that do get it that want to come out and like experience uh the celebration of another record being out, like that's really important to us. So we're gonna reschedule that. And then we've got, I'm giving you like a calendar breakdown. I know that's not what you asked for, but I'm like, look, it means I get to plug shit as well. And I look like I'm doing it kind
Go
of
for it.
stylishly. And then we're doing like a headline tour in May in the UK, which for the first time ever, we're not being selfish. We're like doing something for our fans, which is like playing an album from start to finish, an album called Free. Because during lockdown, it turned 10 years old and we did one of Tim from Charlton's listening parties and it got like a huge reaction from our like fan base. And then even other people like saying, "Oh, I'd never heard this or never heard of you guys," and like loved it and blah blah blah. A week or two after that, like gold records arrived at our house for this album. And I think the nostalgia of all of that. And we were thinking like, do you know what? People are going to just want to go to something that like makes them feel good and like let's do this for our fans. Do you know what I mean? And I know that's cheesy, and I know that's a little bit like it's just not very. It's not a very cool like tagline. Do you know what I mean? Like we'd do this for the fans, but like it just, it just felt like the right thing to do. So yeah, we're doing that in May, and then we'll see what festivals and stuff are happening. But the overall goal is like, I wonder if we can make another honest record, whatever that is. Like we used to have a studio together where all of my gear and all of Ross's gear and the band's backline and everything was all there. In the pandemic, we had to get creative and like sell where we were living and live off of that and move to other places outside of Glasgow a little bit. Um, Now he's got a studio. I'm in his studio today. I've got a studio at home. Is that like, are we setting ourselves up there for maybe making a record in a different way that's like a new process and a new these little things just present themselves and we like follow them. So that feels like we're basically going to be making music the whole year. Because we also kind of get quite turned on by writing songs for other people and the idea of like maybe producing other bands because honestly we have been there and fucking we've got the experience
Yeah.
of making like a record in like a multi-million pound studio and then like an old historic studio that like they make movies about and then we've done it over Zoom and then we've done
Yeah.
it like so we've got a lot of experience to share, so I think we're kind of might start getting into that side of music too.
As you say, I think it's all just summed up as yeah. It's like
Yeah, like we don't know, like we don't know. And you know what? I hope that sort of translates into like, oh, actually, those guys are genuinely just fucking like doing it because they love it, or doing like we're not like we. There's times where like, guys, you just fucking stopped. Why did you make this album? But it's like, yeah, okay. There's a kind of there's a really fundamental part of it where it's like, it's a job, and like we've got fucking people depending on us, and like plans fall away, and you need to make up for, or your world falls apart. So there is part of it that's like obviously inspired by that or pushed on by that, but like there's still a real passion there to like make music. So all these plans that I'm telling you about, we're doing this, we're doing that. If the last 2 years have taught us anything, like we might not be doing any of that, but we will definitely be making music.
I think that's the mic drop moment there,
Is
isn't it? So I think that's a good way to put it up. Yeah, that's
Okay,
a good,
cool.
that's a soundbite right there. Well, thank you for your time.
Oh,
Really
good.
appreciate it.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you.